You're listening to Artistic Finance, show 164. On today's show, a panel of theatrical lighting designers discuss pay negotiations. If this sounds like a frightening topic, keep listening because this is such a positive and calm take on the process. We discuss determining a rate, how to conduct yourself, how to advocate for yourself, when to use an agent and what they do, and using the Union USA 829 resources, whether you are a member or not. There's a lot more topics discussed, but rather than hear me mention them, let's get to the conversation pronto. The questions we answer are from young career professionals and students. These came from a poll we published on Instagram and LinkedIn. We didn't get to all the questions, but thank you to everyone who submitted something. The full session ran 90 minutes. If you are a patron, be sure to be listening on your Patreon podcast feed for the full thing. In addition, there is a printable workbook that goes along with this episode and condenses everything into bullet points. Patrons have access to that in the show notes, and non-patrons can access it without becoming patrons by visiting the Patreon shop at patreon.com/artisticfinance. If you are a student and want access to the full discussion and the workbook, I'll share those with you directly. That goes for anything from any episode that is behind our paywall. Students merely have to ask for it, and you can do that by emailing me at artisticfinancepodcast@gmail.com. Just one more note before we start. Thank you to the designers in this roundtable. I've been doing this show for 4 years, and in that time, I've had several designers turn me down as guests on the show because they were reluctant to talk about the business or finance side of the career, and that's totally fine. I totally get it. But putting this panel together was so effortless on my part because everyone I reached out to energetically said yes. So I'm not used to having such a positive response. And I'm humbled and I'm honored to have gotten such supportive energy coming my way. So if any of you are listening to this, thank you for jumping in. Or if you're listening and you know any of these designers, please let them know that I am so grateful for their help on this. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
You are listening to Artistic Finance, where we help creatives learn about the business of show business.
Welcome, everyone. To those joining us here on the panel, thank you for being here and giving us your time. To those of you joining us via the recording, thank you for listening in. So we're here to discuss a topic that we don't focus on often, as it's a small percentage of our time allotment compared to all the other tasks that we have as designers. And when we do discuss this topic, it's usually between friends or colleagues and not in a group setting like this. So I am additionally grateful to everybody willing to join this discussion, knowing that we're going to give it to public access. I now have the honor to introduce our moderator, Natalie Robin. Natalie is a Philadelphia-based lighting designer and is the labor organizer for USA 829. She is co-author of the book Theater Work, which looks at the past, present, and future of theatrical production labor. Natalie has curated the questions that we've received, and I'm so thankful to have you here. Natalie, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ethan. It's great to be here. And thank you to all of you. We have a bunch of questions from early career designers and students. I'd like to start with a question for the full group and then move on to some individual ones. In full transparency, I know some of you quite well, but can you begin by introducing yourself and then tell us how long have you been designing? How did you get into it? And when was the first time you remember negotiating a fee? And I'm going to do this alphabetically, so we'll start with Asia.
Hello. I should do my intro first. So I'm Asia Jackson. I'm based in now New York, most recently Boston, and I'm a lighting designer, a very excitable one. We'll hear that a few times. So to differentiate, I am a Sagittarius. According to my income taxes, I have been designing as a self-employed lighting designer since 2018. But I have been freelancing and working prior to that. So it's about a decade working in earnest in this field. Uh, my first time negotiating a contract, I will never forget this. Now, this is the one that was the most impressionable for me because it really showed me that this was something that I really needed to do for the good of myself and my peers. So I had just graduated with my master's from Boston University, and I was reached out to design a musical. And there was also something else in rep. It sounded pretty exciting, and they sent me a fee, and I said, "Oh my God, there's no way this is the fee." Because on my exit counseling for grad school, they told me I needed to make $75,000 a year. And this would not equal that or contribute in the slightest. Um, but it was one of the first contracts, and it's important to make sure that you're working. I think that's a big priority to success and being able to be employed is to continue to get work. So I sent them an Excel document that listed all the dates I needed to be there and the times that I needed to be there with an estimated very minimal prep. And it showed them that they would pay me $1.12 an hour to do the work. So I did not take that particular job, but they were very thankful because they had not thought about the job in that way. So since doing that, it has really let me decide what the rate should be and how I negotiate contracts in my future and now.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that and for doing that work. Heather, same questions, introduction, and then how long have you been designing? How did you get into it? And when did you first remember negotiating a fee?
Yeah, so I'm Heather Gilbert, she, her, and I am a Chicago-based lighting designer. And I started, I didn't even encounter lighting design. I was just an audience member who loved it until I got to college. And then I sort of, through the 4 years, discovered lighting. And I did an internship right after college for a year, and then I stayed for a second year. And then eventually in Houston, which is where I'm from. And then I came to Chicago for grad school, and I have basically had my career in this city ever since. It's funny, I was going to say the first time I negotiated a contract, I ended up actually not taking the show because it still sounded like a nightmare. But I was thinking about it while I was listening to Asia, and I realized that when I was in graduate school, I bartended at the non-equity bar in Chicago, which was quite a job. I tried to not always tell people that I was a lighting designer because they would always ask me to do their shows then. And they'd be like, we've got $100. And I was like, no. And I just decided for the most part to like keep it on the down low. But when I was a bartender, my rule was always whatever I was going to make if I took off, because the thing that was nice about bartending is I could take off 2 weeks. And I didn't nobody called me and said, hey, can you make a gin and tonic while you're on the show? You know what I mean? It was perfect. It was a perfect job, and I could prepare ahead of time and get people in to cover my shifts. But I had a rule that I had to make as much as I would make bartending. And I would tell the companies that all the time. And I would say, if you can't pay that much, then maybe I'm not there on 2 Saturday nights. Maybe I'm only there for 1 Saturday night. And we sort of negotiate that maybe I'm just not at that preview. And it's funny because I never really thought about the fact that I just started negotiating at that point when I was in school. So those fees, of course, this is the 90s. I've been doing this for 30 years. Those fees were horrifying. They were much more than 100. They were more like 300, but there you go. So.
Thanks, Heather. Isabella.
Hi, my name is Isabella Byrd. I'm also a lighting designer. I've been working professionally in the industry for 15 years, I'd say. And then the gray zone before, which was college fading into summer stock professional work. Heather, I feel like we just every time. I'm also from Houston, and we have to talk about that more seriously.
I know Alejandro and I talk about it. You and I never have. We have to talk about it.
But I when I first heard this question, I was like, when did I actually negotiate a fee? Because for so long, working, like coming up through regional theater and even into off Broadway, like you don't get to negotiate the fee, and like the tragedy of that, just inheriting the number. And I was like, was it recently that I first negotiated a fee? But that's not true, because I think early in summer stock times, when we were truly making like tuppence for a week of work, I remember negotiating with the Spoleto Festival production manager for my weekly fee. And my friend had had that same job the year before and had told me she was making like over $500 a week. And I was like shocked and excited about that. And then when I got my offer, it was like $325 a week. And I was devastated and tried to counter, but like did it poorly, and then sort of just inherited the bad number and carried on. And so it's definitely made a mark on me, that particular like demoralizing negotiation. And I think I've taken some of those lessons into my more recent like commercial experiences. But it was rough back then. It's still rough. Who am I kidding? That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Jeanette.
Hello, my name is Jeanette Yu. I am also a lighting designer, but I would distinguish myself by saying that I'm also do projection design, and I also make puppetry work on my own. So, and I'm an Aries, to follow Aja about your sign. I actually don't know. In terms of negotiating fee, I remember negotiating for other things, like a rental budget, my assistant fee, other material and supplies, and like condition of work. Because I consider that all part of my entire universes. So I don't remember. I remember negotiating about like getting more budget for things, because I think that one of the biggest challenges as a lighting designer, or any like designer for which your supplies are based on weekly rental, that people forget that yes, you can have a $20,000 set budget, but then you give me like, $2,000 for like an 8-week run of a show. That means that I can get like 2 par cans and like 2 pieces of gel. Like that just isn't realistic to actually do that. So I remember negotiating for those things more so than directly negotiating for my pay, because I consider my entire working condition as part of the package. So it's not like I'm easy. Like unfortunately, I don't have like exactly a thing to tell because of that.
I think you've told us some important things, which I'm not going to spend our time talking about, but about how this industry values stuff over humans, and teaches us to do the same. But thank you, Jeanette. Jen Schriever, same questions.
Hi, I'm Jen Schriever. I'm a lighting designer. I live in New York. I started lighting in high school, and I think my first professional job was the summer after I graduated high school. I was hired to light other high school shows, and I don't think I realized, which I just did calculator math, was 26 years ago. I don't think I realized I could negotiate like basically till I had an agent. Like I don't think I ever asked. More like Jeanette, I asked for like, oh my gosh, I need an assistant, or like I need a better rental budget. But I definitely, until like my very first commercial gig that I didn't actually get hired for in the end, like I think like looking back, I'm like, gosh, I was so young to be like considered for this project. And I think that the producer was like, I don't have to pay this person very much. And I actually asked for money. And that was when I was like, oh wait, they want me to do this huge job for what I've been doing regional theater for. So it wasn't until then that I realized like there's some options in play in negotiation. And yeah, that's me. I'm a Gemini. Okay.
Ken, same questions. Will you introduce yourself? Tell us roughly how long you've been doing this, and when the first time you remember negotiating a fee was.
My name's Ken Billington. I'm a lighting designer. I'm based out of New York. I did my first off-Broadway show in 1969, and then my first Broadway show in 1973. And this fall, I'll be doing my 105th Broadway show. So I've been at this a long time. And I negotiate my own contracts. I have an attorney who does the words, but he's since passed away, so I do all my own contracts. Just to give you an example, when I did summer stock, they paid me $20 a week. I just did a calculation that now in today's dollars, that's $200 a week. And they fed us lunch. I don't remember dinner. And then my first off-Broadway show, a play called Fortune in Men's Eyes, the United Scenic Artist minimum was $224.50 and $35 a week. Now, by the way, $224 equals $1,836 today, and the $35 a week equals $287 in today's dollars. But I remember very carefully, it was before the internet. I couldn't remember if it was $224.50 or $224.75 when I wrote up the contract. So I put it at $225. I gave myself a 25-cent raise. And I took it into the general manager, who looked at it and tore it up and said, "We're getting another lighting designer. That's not what we negotiated." He said, "I'm going to go talk to the producers, but we're looking for somebody else." They hired me. I did the show. And by the way, we did multiple companies. It ran for several years. I actually made a lot of money on it. So all I can say is I didn't care, quite honestly, on my first off-Broadway show what they had given me. I got a full rental budget. It was famous director, Sal Mineo was directing it. I mean, it was like a good gig, and it got me a lot more work. So when I look at it, I say, okay, that was investing in myself so I could move forward. And it wasn't a lot of money. I mean, $1,800 today is not a lot of money. But when you're young, you can sleep on a futon. When you're 40, sleeping on a futon is not so much fun. So anyway, that's my story.
Thanks, Ken. It's sad how close our numbers now are to the numbers then. Okay, the next group of questions I've sort of arbitrarily assigned to people. Feel free to jump in if you have an important thought. Heather, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. This question comes from Zane, who is a student in New York City. And Zane asks, I'm wondering what are some tips to start as a fresh out of college aspiring lighting designer?
Oh man, I feel like so many of us on this are teachers, and all I ever do is give students advice. Like that, it comes out of my mouth so effortlessly now. It's a little horrifying. I'm sure they'd prefer it not to. I'm assuming we're thinking a lot about negotiating contracts in the specific. Yeah.
Yeah, I think pay and negotiations.
Yeah, I think the thing that's most important, I talk a lot with my students about sort of deal breakers and like what your deal breakers are and why you're doing this. Like Ken was just talking about like things that actually like do sort of advance you. But there are other things like are these your friends? Are you creating a piece with them? Are you trying something new you've never tried before? Is this an experience? Are you getting to work with new things, new experience? And so thinking about those and how those sort of fall into it. But I guess the best advice I can give, and I do all the time, is to normalize asking for more money on every single contract. Learn how to ask it. It seems terrifying right at first to say, I need $7,000 more. That seems like a lot, but especially for somebody just out of college. But to say, I need $1,000 more, I need $500 more, and be ready to walk away if you feel like I did that years ago on that project, which ended up being a very famous play, very famous playwright's first play. And I still didn't do it. And hilariously. But being ready to walk away if it feels like you're not going to be able to do your best in those circumstances, right? Or eat eat food that month. But to just sort of normalize that you just always ask, I need more money. And if I can't have more money, can it come in a different way? Can I have more associate money, which would then allow me more time? Can I have, also, I don't think when you're just out of college, you say associate money that freely, but can you have money? Will you pay for cars for me at night so that I am not having to take the train home in the middle of the night? All of those things. But I guess just making it something you always do will make it a lot easier too. It's my best advice.
That's great. I think it's important that we remember that it's okay to need things and to tell people what we need to make something possible.
And also that if you say no, if you're like this one, like I said no to a play, that's very funny to me. I mean, I don't know that it would have ever been anything else in my life, but that person is incredible. The playwright is so famous now. And it was originally a Chicago playwright. Could that have like propelled my life forward? Potentially it could have, but guess what? It did it in a different way. So when that one project isn't the one that works out for you, it's totally okay. Something else will happen. You don't have to panic that this one job is not going to be the thing that makes the rest of your life, or breaks the rest of your life. Yes, you can move forward on a project. It can be your life changer, right? But it doesn't mean it's the only one that can be. So it's okay to walk away from it if you feel like financially or work-wise, you're going to have to suffer in some way. The other thing is also, which I guess I should say, is always ask exactly what it is that they expect you to be doing, right? Do you have to be the electrician? In which case, do you get more money? Do you have people who are going to hang and focus lights for you? There were years, I used to work with this theater company in Chicago, and I learned to readjust all of the way I referred to everything. Like I'd be like the extension cord, because I always had an actor working with me who was actually super great at being an electrician, but did not know the terminology, So, and I did it with that theater company because I love them so much and I wanted to make those things with them. They're still incredibly important to me. So, we make some choices we do get to make based on our heart still.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Heather. Isabella, this question comes from Gio, who's a lighting designer, electrician, and programmer in Houston. As someone new to the industry, I find myself trying to balance asserting the worth of my services and just accepting the jobs because I need them. As such, I have some anxiety about, quote, scaring away opportunities and not negotiating in the end, especially when talking over the phone as opposed to email. If you also experience this, how did you manage it? Or how would you balance it now with 20/20 hindsight?
It's such a good question. And I think that feeling is a feeling we all still experience, no matter the space in your career you might be in. And I definitely think it is scary. It's always scary. And ultimately, like, the value of the work is just the value of the work. And I think we have to, my mom bought me this ridiculous book when I was 25 that was called Knowing Your Value. And I was just like so mortified by it for so long. I've never read it, but I hold the title close to me, to myself. But I do think that you are worth that. Like, there is a rate that you can always set for yourself and not go below. And whether that's, you can scale that to the situation, whether that's the living wage at the moment, whether that the project demands more of you, as Heather was just discussing. I think like we can't be scared we can't cut ourselves down because the rest of the industry is constantly cutting us down. So we have to push past that and advocate for ourselves more. And I would, part of the way that I've navigated that is to check in with all of my peers about what they're charging. And I didn't do that initially when I was coming up because money was more taboo to talk about. And I think one of the great things about the moment right now, this modern moment, is that people are talking about it more actively, such in this podcast, and I think more casually, whether it's at the bar or just picking up the phone really quick about a particular job. So I think checking with your peers about what they're charging and making sure that if anyone is advocating for a higher rate on a project, that you might know someone else they might turn to if you said no, and making sure that they're not setting their value too low as well. Like, we're all pushing that number up together. And then sometimes we do decide to take a lower rate because the project is meaningful to us, because it's with our friends, because I learned very early, and I kind of casually hold it with me, but I think it's the 3 Ps. I don't know if anyone else on this prod has heard that, where it's like it's either the people, the pay, or the project. Like you have to have at least 2 of the 3 to say yes to a thing. And yeah, if it's your best friends and you love them and the play is meaningful to you, like cowabunga, go forth. But if you don't, if at least 2 of those things aren't there, like move on. And this actually happened to me really recently. I had a project that I was threatening to quit because a commercial off-Broadway producer was refusing to put us on a union contract, which was just crazy. And then I knew the other lighting designer that they were reaching out to be like, hey, we think she might drop out. And that lighting designer, I was like, don't say yes to this, because that term is absolutely unreasonable. We have to have a union contract. And in the end, it worked out, but we all sacrificed a little bit. So the value is relative always, but I think just making sure you don't feel bad about any project you're saying yes to is like the key thing. I've seen some nods on the screen, but if anyone else has voice to that question, please don't hesitate.
Can I make just one quick thing to Isabella's, the 3 Ps, which are right, good project, good pay, good people. And I just want to say this lovingly, nice people aren't always the same as good people. Students, like you may love your best friends, but the project could still be a nightmare. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. My favorite advice to give is don't work for assholes. And so, which is hard because sometimes you don't find out they're an asshole until too late. So then you can't work for assholes again. You have to hold yourself to that, which is its own sort of value of your work as well. We can't gift our talent, our skill sets to people using abusive work practices. We don't bring us all up in our value and our worth and kindness if we don't stand by that.
And just practically, like, it's so easy to be like, do all these things to tell the young person or tell the next person what to do, and they might not do what you're saying to do. You know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to say all these things. And I think like the thing that stuck out in Zane's question was like scaring away opportunities or whatever. Like, just be kind, even when you're saying no, or when you're questioning things. Like, this is going to sound like totally crazy, but like, go with me. Like, general managers are people too. And I mean that. And like, even when they're doing their rough job, like, just try to find the humanity in the people you're talking to. They're doing a really tough job sometimes. They have a tiny amount of money from the producers, and they're deciding, maybe terribly and awfully and rudely, how to divide it up, and that like they might need some guidance. But like, if you can, I'm not saying accept what they have to say. I'm just saying, if you're saying no, thank you, or if you're asking for something, you won't scare anybody away if you're just being super kind, even when you're saying goodbye.
That's right. Yeah. And they're, I think, more likely to find a middle ground and find some growth in the negotiation and in that value if we're all treating each other kindly in negotiation.
Yeah, it's easy to get angry. And I've gotten so angry. And like, I think I'm realizing sometimes it's just better to, share openly and, look at the best in somebody. It's like, be the Buddha, just like try to like look at the best in somebody's, situation. And it's hard. It's hard.
You make a great point, Jen, that like sometimes the person you're negotiating with isn't the decision maker. So sometimes they are subject to some of the same limitations that you might be. And I think to the Isabella, back to your point about if you know who they're going to ask next, if people, talking about what we make, building solidarity with our colleagues, inside and outside a union context is how we lift the bar. If we never talk about what we make, we can't move the bar. But it's because we talk about it that we can move it. So I think that's an important thing to remember.
Can I add something here? We must remember, we deal with general managers. Rarely do you negotiate with the producer. We deal with the general manager who's a hired hand, who is paid, who knows what he's paid, and has been given a budget by the producer of some number. And now this manager has to divide that number up into all the things that need to be divided up in, including toilet paper, And I had a manager call me within the last 2 years, well, actually in the last year, and said, Ken, I'm embarrassed to call you. They are offering you minimum. And I've told him it's wrong. He said, that is the number I have been given. And I am really sorry. And they told me I had to call you. And I declined. And he said, and then, of course, they came back and offered more money. But it isn't necessarily that the general manager is a bad person. And that is somebody you're going to be dealing with for many years in your career. So throwing your pencil at them and storming out the door and slamming it has probably made you lose the next 5 shows. Oh no, that person is, you don't want them, they throw things. So it's you need to be as pleasant and nice as possible. And if you turn it down, you have to give your reasons. I honestly can't do this because the numbers you're offering just won't pay my rent, and I can't do this. And shake hands and leave, but don't slam the door, because you will slam the door on a lot of other projects.
Thank you, Ken. Jeanette, go ahead.
I was actually going to link this to the question that also from Zane later, because I think that this two things related, because I was later, I think that Zane also have a question about how to begin to negotiate a pay rate, which I think is also related to this conversation. Like aside from like the idea with the general manager, which I 100% agree that all the people, at least, I mean, I could be totally naive. In my years of working at this, no one is intentionally saying that let's not pay this person. Like if it does, I'm sure that happens in the world sometime, but generally people aren't like saying that I have this pot of gold that I'm sitting on and I'm deliberately not going to pay you the money, generally. So it's not really the people's fault. It's just the circumstances. So to relate to that question, I think I always try to understand the scope and the structure of the project. Because like in the commercial setting and in regional theater setting, you may be negotiating with the general manager, or even sometimes negotiating with the production manager. Maybe the production manager is the person who reach out, which in regional theater, that's pretty common. But then if you're starting out, they could be just your friends, which is a totally different negotiating understanding than you would be the negotiating, or like with a smaller producer. In that case, you may be really negotiating with the artistic director of the company, depending on where you are. I always try to understand the scope of the project. So at least I'm asking for things that is within that scope. Because it doesn't really help anyone by saying that, if the scope of the project is like a $10,000 budget, by scale, you kind of can understand where you will be getting paid. And then I think that asking within the range of the thing and asking about what is possible with them, leaving the door open in that initial conversation, I think is important. So that it helps you to come to it as a conversation versus I must have $1,500 a week otherwise, And that over time, and it builds, I do think that it is very hard to start, right? Because you're going to have friends asking you to do things, mostly maybe they installed this new automatic blackout thing in my office. So I have to keep waiting. I'm not moving enough. I have to keep moving. So I think that my advice to starting out is to really just treat it as a conversation, not just a negotiation, but try to understand the scope of what that project actually is, and then go back to what Isabella and everybody was saying to the reason then why you want to take it or not take it.
Well, Jeanette, I feel like what you just framed too, it's when it is conversational that way, the general manager or whoever you're speaking with in negotiation is also immediately reflecting on the balance of the numbers. And sometimes the numbers are not balanced appropriately. So suddenly they're like, oh, we do have $80,000 or we have $800 in the set and we have $2 for you. Like that, they have to be contend with that imbalance themselves. So like it's that conversational, that candidness can go really far.
Can I jump in for 1 second, Jen? And then I just want to lift up that thing that you're talking about, Isabella, and in response to Jeanette, is a really important part of this conversation, which is I have a set designer colleague who uses this example often, which is that when she's designing a set and the set budget is $7,500 and her fee is $3,000, she feels okay. But when that same $3,000 fee, which is the Workbook fee, gets her a $75,000 set budget, right? She feels like she's being taken advantage of. That there's enough money, and that realistically, just to name it, taking $5,000 out of that set budget and giving it to the set designer so that she's making $8,000 is not going to impact what the set looks like that significantly, and is going to increase the quality of life of the designer exponentially, right? To go from a $3,000 fee to an $8,000 fee is massive. And to go from a $75,000 budget to a $70,000 budget is not. And I think that I just want to offer that when a producer says to you, well, the budget is X and the fee is Y, it is okay to ask them to reallocate those funds. They won't always say yes, but it is a starting place. The money is already in the budget.
I just want to say one last thing. To the general managers who are listening to this podcast, if you are assistants and designers are people too. And when you're asking for more money, they're not being divas or sharks. They're literally asking for the bare minimum. So I'm just like, it goes in both directions. And also I read Zane's like full length question, I think it was, or one of these full length questions was like, also, they were like, how do I do this when I'm talking on the phone? They were implying harder than email. And I actually think the phone is better if you can get the guts to do it. I know people always say, right, get it in writing, whatever. But like when you're young and new, who I assume we're leading, this is for young folks, is all about connections and connecting with people. And people, quick, busy people read emails and they don't always put the best vibe to your tone. And you might think I'm being really professional and serious, and like, you might be actually coming off kind of cold and demanding. So like, I'm not saying you are, listener, but like, I personally think a phone call where you can be like, brave and human, and speak your needs is very helpful. So
I'm going to take it one step further. I prefer face-to-face, go to the office and sit out. And how you can catch them is not catch them, but is how you can get a better picture is while you're sitting there with them and they're at their computer or they have a piece of paper, you say, what do you have for rentals? And they go, oh, type away and they say, we have this much money. And what did you budget for assistance? And they type away and say, we budgeted this much money. Then you get a total picture, honest picture, by the way, of what they have assigned for this show for everybody. And that's when you can say, oh, you have $8,000 a week for a major Broadway musical where you need 14. So everything is off. I don't know if anybody does anything in person anymore, but it's sure. And by the way, it's over and done with in 15 minutes and you're done and you have your answer. And half the time just say, you want to get lunch? And you go out and have lunch with them.
Right. And maybe Zoom is the new in person. Yeah. Just because you're right, like face-to-face and humanizing helps. It also makes it harder for them to obfuscate like some of those details. That makes so much sense.
Can I just add on for the doing of it? Because sometimes like all of this is the difficult part is the doing. So I found it's quite helpful if you just pretend that you're doing it for your best friend. You're doing it for your associate. You're doing it for your assistant. That can make the doing a lot easier and feel less like I'm asking this big thing, I'm putting in this request, this is a me problem, to I get to be the advocate. Just that touch of separation is really helpful to like picking up the phone.
Thank you, Jeanette. I think that's great. So we're talking around something here, which is like, how do we know what we need to ask for? How do we know what we need to make in order to do the project? And I know this answer is different for different scales of projects. We've talked about scope. That's obviously irrelevant. Jen, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to ask, how do you decide, or what are the factors you take into account when you're deciding what your minimum is?
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, it's so layered and varied. I'll say this, like, obviously 26 years after starting, when I was just accepting what I was getting, I now have a 7-year-old. You know, my finances are different. I have college in the future to pay for. I have, or hopefully, you know, or help out with, or whatever. You know, I'm getting older. My husband's getting older. You know, like we're dealing, you know, with health issues. You know, not bad thing. I'm just saying, you know, like the finances of being older are different. So that factors in now to my current needs. I would say a lot of it is I ask for, like Jeanette keeps saying, which is so true, the full scope. Like, what is the calendar? What are you expecting of me? What are the pre-production needs? Like, are we meeting every week? Is it really invested and involved, which I love, but like, is that happening? Or is there sort of like, you know, a rep plot and some friends, and we kind of already know what we're doing, and I'm showing up for 3 days, you know? Is there an assistant and associate budget? Because I have a lot of time needs outside of my job. I used to just give my whole life to my job until 7 years ago when I had a kid. So 7 years before now, I could do anything, show up anywhere, be anywhere, do anything. And I loved it. That was personally worked for me. I liked it. Now I don't want to miss first grade drop off. I don't want to miss parents' night. I don't want to miss certain activities. I don't want to miss the summer. So like, when, you know, there's lots of things that like affect, my choice of show and therefore its pay. So I might take a show in the summer if it's going to pay me a ton of money, or it has a future that might pay me a ton of money. Otherwise, I'm probably not doing, or again, it really interests me, or it's somewhere interesting that my family can come with me. I might not be going to a certain summer stock that I would easily have done 7 years ago, you know, just because I can't find that my value in it. So yeah, is it in town or out of town? In town has high value for me because my son is in town. So like high value to be in town. But as a programmer says famously, sometimes you got to go out of town to be in town. So there's that. So there's a whole little like pros and cons list, right? Again, of course, the quality of the script, the budget for the support staff. Yeah, I don't draft my own show anymore. I don't have that time. Like, if I'm not in tech, I have the morning, you know, tech starts after lunch, right? So I'm busy all the way after school till after bedtime. I see Henry in the morning at drop off. So I'm not going to spend any extra time I have drafting minutia. Like, so is there a budget for a support staff? And what is my time commitment? And that all helps me discover what my minimum is for a particular job. And the last thing I'll say is like this new trend, which isn't so new. And like, I'm sure Ken has done this like a ton and it's been happening forever, but I feel like it's more frequent, at least in my life, is like commercial shows, which basically mean they're not bound necessarily by a CBA, depending, unless they're Broadway, happening at LORT theaters that do have a CBA. And it's a very easy comparison. I've done a bajillion since the pandemic. I've been stockpiling them because they all promise they're going to go to Broadway. And, you know, it's like 2 weeks is a regular commitment to a LORT show, basically. 10 days sometimes. 14 days maximum. And I just did one at a Lord Theater that their regular Lord show is a 10 to 14 day commitment. That was like a 38-day commitment. So with the same fee, the same Lord fee. So like, yes, it's coming alongside, a Broadway contract or a promise of a Broadway contract and a little bit of padded things, but it's a huge time commitment and a huge time commitment out of town. So sort of, when you're working it out, you've got to write down, I always do like a little iPad's note, like what's my pros and cons? How does it lay up with other shows? Is there a gap? Am I overlapping? What is the quality of life mental here? I also, one thing, from earlier, my mentor used to tell me, keep your overhead low. Like, it's hard to make money as a designer. Don't get the newest car. Don't get the best iPhone. Don't get things you have to pay for, because you're going to have to realistically be flexible no matter how hard you're fighting for yourself. Like, it's great when your show hits and you're making money, but that is a gift, not necessarily a given. It should be a given. But, so I'm always sort of looking at the big picture a lot, like quarterly looking at the big picture and looking ahead and figuring out where things fit and how, it's a roundabout answer to say, you got to look at your whole picture and decide for you. And don't forget, don't just be like, oh my God, they're paying me $20,000 and like, I'm going to do it. And then they're like, oh, by the way, we don't want to pay for assistance and whatever. And then you find you're doing everything. And, you got to look at the whole picture to decide how it works for you.
I want to jump in before Isabella, I see you, but just to offer some acronym clarification. So Jen just used a bunch of acronyms. We're so good at this. A CBA is a collectively bargained agreement. That's a contract negotiated between the union and the employer. In the case of all of us here, that's United Scenic Artists and the employer. LORT is the League of Resident Theaters, which is a group of 81 not-for-profit theaters spread across the country, which negotiates their CBA together. And what Jen is referring to are what's often known as commercially enhanced productions, which are productions which are produced by a League of Resident Theater, not-for-profit theater, with additional funds from commercial producers, in which they are functioning inside of that collectively bargained agreement, but with expectations towards a future commercial production, likely on Broadway. So I just wanted to give a little explanation of all those letters. Isabella.
Well done. Succinctly put. Well, I wanted to lift up that I think a lot of people on the Zoom and like talking in the industry right now about how we can push the rates up are like very often turning to living wage calculators. The like default one that a lot of us are using is the MIT one, which I'm sure we can make that link available through this podcast. And like that as like a very, very base level is like, especially for students just coming out of school and looking at like living in a new place, like that's a really good place to start. And then taking in to a lot of taking in your personal resources, as Jen was just reflecting. There's also an EPI calculator that we can share as well for everyone to use for that living wage calculator. And then the other thing I just wanted to lift up quickly was I was in a conversation sort of in the deep pandemic, a group of artists who were supposed to do a show at a New York theater were trying to be in direct conversation with the administrators of an off-Broadway company. And we were trying to like give them insights into the plight of the designer and like the terrible fees we were all functioning on. And one of the general managers in that conversation said to us, he's like, I realize now that so often the minimum is the maximum for so many theaters and their budgeting, and that it's like so demoralizing to hear that, but it's often true that like entire institutions are just using the union minimums to set their entire budget and like get by, and getting above that number for a lot of these very established tiers of work is like really, dare I say, has been impossible for a lot of USA 829's members. And I think the more we're talking about this, the more it can sort of chip away at that. And I sadly, that is still true. I think like maybe once in an off-Broadway company has the design team collectively been able to push us above that minimum because we were just flat out refusing to do the work after having developing a project for 4 years. Like if we did the emotional math, how long we'd been working on the play, it was really gnarly to think about how much time and we had put into it. But I want to sort of normalize that the phrasing, or like the knowing that a lot of people do think of it that way. Sadly, the minimum has often been the maximum, but it doesn't have to be. And it's one of the reasons we collectively are trying to push up the minimums within the union. And that's a very complex network of negotiations, but it's a long con in many ways. So we keep fighting.
What we need to remember is LORT theaters do favored nations. So if they're hiring me with all my years of experience and the person who graduated from school this year, we're both getting the same fees. I don't think that's correct, by the way, but that's what it is. And they have written it in that nobody is making any more or less. So the LORT thing is a killer for not making any money and the time commitments. And if you do an enhanced production, which I do, I find out who the enhancement is from and get a deal from them before I head out to wherever it is, that if they do it again, I'm doing it. But it's that favored nations. Off-Broadway, you're not stuck on favored nations. Broadway, you're not stuck on it, but in LORT, probably yes.
Yeah. One last thing I'll say, and then I've been talking a lot, so I'll say less. But I feel like sometimes in negotiating what your minimum is, you can also collectively with the group of people you're working with establish what the time minimum is going to be for you all. Like maybe everyone needs to freeze earlier, like, and it makes more sense with the finances. Like you can have that sort of transparent conversation with your colleagues and establish that, because sometimes one person needs to leave the project a little earlier and it actually sort of accidentally freezes everybody else. I don't know if people have had that experience, particularly in LORT productions. And so I think the more conversation with like the whole team about people's timelines and what their resources have been and what their minimum is, like actually helps balance the various minimums more equally across the whole lot. It's a complex web, but I think that's one way to like get more value of your time.
Yes, that's my dream. And like what Heather was saying, like maybe I need to work one Saturday at the bar or whatever in order to do, like, it's just, as you're saying that, I'm like, right, time. And then I'm like, gosh, but of course there are directors that are like, super fine, like whatever you got to do, like totally go. I trust you, we're going to make it. And then there are directors who want to hang on to everybody, even if someone's leaving early, unless it's them, till the last second. Sometimes even if it is them, beyond. So it's like educating our director friends / bringing it up at the dinner table in a friendly way about, our time. But they're also underpaid and they're also used to it. So it's tricky.
I was also going to say, I do that with my associates a lot, or my assistants in LORT theaters, particularly here in Chicago, where there's like, it's never quite enough money for the hours. And so I will sit down with them ahead of time and I'll say, what's your day job? Like, how can we make sure that we are like balancing when you're with me? Like, I don't need you at every preview. I'm not telling you my notes during previews. I'm doing that myself. Right. But like, if you, like, I have one who works at an Old Navy.
That's it for this week's episode. If you heard this on the public podcast feed, you only heard 60 minutes. To access the rest of the discussion, visit our Patreon page and become a patron. You'll get access to our entire archive of extended episodes, outtakes, and any worksheets or supplemental materials. If you don't want to become a patron and are only interested in this episode, visit our Patreon shop where you can make a one-time purchase of this full episode and the accompanying worksheet. pay negotiations for lighting designers. As always, free to students who request it. If you are an educator, you are granted permission to distribute the worksheet to your students in print or digital form. I do ask that you let students know where you sourced it. My takeaways from today's discussion are so extensive that if I were to talk through them, I'd add another half an hour to this episode. In lieu of that, Nicole and I summarized the discussion points into a workbook. It's a perfect thing to print out and keep by your desk when you're negotiating to remind yourself things to keep in mind. Again, that workbook is attached to the show notes on the Patreon podcast feed. I will mention some takeaways that stuck out to me. Asia putting in the work and typing up hours on site and comparing that to the fee being offered and then sharing that back with the producers. That's important work to do to remind us of the value we're bringing, and important work for our peers who can't take the time to do it or aren't willing to alert the producers or GMs of the situation. Heather and Asia mentioned to join the union as soon as possible. If you're doing the work, you deserve to be protected. This used to be a thing where you needed to pass the test to get into the union and work your way up into the union status. It's evolving into a more inclusionary thing that if you're doing the work, you deserve the protections like health insurance and dignified retirement just for doing the work. Ken mentioned for LORT shows that you won't get more than favored nations or the minimum. If it's enhanced, you can get an agreement to be hired if it transfers, but that's for experienced designers. Off-Broadway and Broadway, you can fight for more than the minimum, but Isabella mentioned that's an uphill battle, so be prepared to put the time in. I do want to mention the favored nations in LORT is an unofficial thing. It isn't an actual thing that each designer has to get paid the same. It just works out conveniently for the GMs and the producers to budget it that way. Just because they want it that way doesn't mean you can't point out that you're working a lot for this specific project and you need more resources than they budgeted. Jeanette mentioned understanding the scope of the project, otherwise you're flying blind. Usually you can feel this out, but ask for clarification up front if you need to know. And another point from Jeanette, which was make it a conversation. Negotiation is what it is, but that's a word with harsh connotations. Having a conversation to sort out the pay is a gentler way to approach it. That is something that Jen also echoed about being nice and kind. Even if you're angry, still keep the conversation going. Those are just a few things. Check out the workbook for the rest of the takeaways. A big thank you again to the designers for jumping in and giving us their time and their energy to discuss this topic so thoughtfully. And a big thank you to Natalie Robin for sorting through the questions and keeping us on schedule, while of course throwing in helpful clarifications and thoughts along the way. I don't know if I've mentioned LDI on this show yet. I'm suffering from the great computer debacle of 2024, which you'll hear about next week. But because of that debacle, I'm not sure what I've said on what episode. But in case I haven't mentioned it, I'll be at LDI on December 8th in Las Vegas. We'll be recording a live episode titled Financial Independence for Creatives. So if you happen to be attending LDI or happen to be in Las Vegas at that time, please swing by and listen in or join the discussion. I know it's right around the corner, but check out your calendar and see if you can make it, especially if you're a patron or a longtime listener, because one of my favorite things about going to LDI was the time I met patron Gary Archer and listener Sarah Gosses. Those were basically the highlights of my life. Well, that and being a dad are basically the things I want on my gravestone. I wouldn't be upset if my gravestone read, "Here lies Ethan, loving husband, father, who once met Gary Archer and Sarah Gosses at LDI." The dad joke to end the episode, another Ethan Steinmel original here. Why should you always bring a source for with you when talking to producers, GMs, or agents about upcoming projects? So you won't be left in the dark when they start negotiating your pay. That's it for today. Until next time, break a leg.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance, where we interview successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire the creative community. To access our show notes and resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.